Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Jeanette. This is a channel where I talk about movies, TV shows,
What's over here? These are a bunch of books.
and anything I could think of. If you're new, welcome. And if you're coming back, welcome back and hope you're doing well. Today, I am going to be talking about the book versus reality with the 2019 book, The Lazarus Files, a cold case investigation, and the case of Sherri Rasmussen. Disclaimer, this video will be talking about a true crime that focuses on words that rhyme with burger.
Busta Rhymes!
So viewer discretion is advised. Spoiler alerts, this video focuses on a case that involves someone who might have an update on their life by the time that I published this, and also talks about people who might have gotten away with certain crimes and discipline. As a result, I will only refer to them by their last names. That being said, please do not reach out to them. Please don't make contact with them or make any threats to them or their family. Let's just try to let them live their lives. Please like and subscribe for more content. So Sherri Rasmussen was a 29-year-old independent woman. She was the eldest daughter of Nels and Loretta Rasmussen from Tucson, Arizona. She moved to California to attend Loma Linda University for nursing. She wanted to be a nurse and worked at UCLA for a few years before moving to the Glendale Adventist Medical Center as the director of nursing. Her father, Nels, suggested that she become a doctor, but she didn't want to do that because she didn't really had money on the mind. She just wanted to take care of people. On February 24th, 1986, Rasmussen called in sick to avoid giving a motivational speech that day, which she hated for her position. She used her back injury that she incurred while doing aerobics one day as an excuse. Her husband of 3 months, John Ruetten, left their condo in Van Nuys to go to work at his new job. Throughout the day, Ruetten would try to make phone calls to just check in on her. However, the phone wasn't being picked up and the answering machine was not on. And that's usually the case when both of them are going to be out for the day, and he probably felt that she forgot before she left. John didn't think anything suspicious, so when he returned home, he noticed there were broken glass on the driveway and that Sherri's BMW, his engagement present for her, was missing in the garage. He figured the side window of the car broke and Sherri just went to a nearby auto shop to get it fixed. However, when he walked upstairs from their downstairs garage, he finds Sherri's body lying on the ground in the living room with gunshots. There were evidence of a struggle with a broken vase, a bloody handprints next to the burglar alarm's panic button, and a toppled credenza. She also had defensive wounds and a bruise to her face on her upper right eyelid. The gun had been fired through a quilted blanket to muffle the sound, and the blanket was found next to Sherri's body. Once LAPD detectives arrived, they noticed there appeared to be a bite mark on Rasmussen's arm. They took a swab of it for DNA. And funny enough, 1986 was the first year that they introduced DNA into the court system as evidence. That's not going to haunt us later. When looking around, they noticed the window above the garage is broken. They found out that one of the bullets kind of ricocheted into the glass window, which caused the broken glass to be in the driveway. The stereo system looked that it was knocked over, and a cord and a cable cord was lying nearby, almost as if it was going to be used on Sherri as a way to tie her up. The only item that was actually stolen from the condo was the marriage license, which is not weird at all. During the investigation, detectives interviewed the maid that was working next door at a neighbor's condo, and she described how she heard what seems to be like two people falling down and screaming, but did not hear the gunshots. She also felt that it was a domestic dispute and decided not to call the police. And please note, it was a different time. Two gardeners nearby spotted a purse outside the condo and gave it to a nearby neighbor as the residents of Unit 205, which was John and Sherri's condo, did not answer. Detectives interviewed the two guys and they were clear of any wrongdoing. They interviewed John to see if he had something to do with Sherri's death, and he didn't really fully grieve in the way that most loved ones should grieve. He wasn't bawling in tears, and he was pretty sad but not fully crying. And even when he cried, it didn't really feel it was enough of a cry. It just kind of felt pretty mild. But as we know now that people grieve different compared to others, they also had him take a lie detector test, which he actually did fail. But they felt that it was just like a glitch in the system. And also, lie detector tests have later been proven junk science at this point. When asked if there were anyone who was enraged with him or with Sherri, he mentioned that there might have been someone at Sherri's work that was kind of upset that she got the promotion over them, but it didn't really go into anything. It was just kind of like, yeah, like someone was upset, but they wouldn't go far enough to murder someone. When the detectives asked if John had any ex-girlfriends that may want to inflict violence on him or his family, he said no. And this could be because he didn't think that he had any past girlfriends aside from Sherri. We'll get to that later. Nels and Loretta Rasmussen were not notified by police about their daughter's death until literally the next day. Instead, they were notified by John's father 6 hours after they discovered her body. Despite LAPD noting that they had notified the family in their software and in their timeline of the investigation, it didn't really happen. As a result, the detectives narrowed their theory to believe that the murder was a robbery gone wrong, since the BMW was stolen and left on the side street a few days later and several blocks away. Detectives assumed this was done by someone who has robbed and burglarized before. There were two burglars that stole stereo systems at a condo not far from Sherri and John's place. They were caught by the owner, but they managed to escape. But detectives felt that they could have been the main suspects of Sherri's case. And even when new evidence were brought up later, the detectives kept the theory no matter what. And because of that, the case went cold. Nels Rasmussen tried to light the fire under the detectives throughout the years by calling them, checking in on the case, offering to help out, offering to provide extra money for LAPD to further investigate this, as well as posting a reward of any evidence or tips on the case to the public. But the detectives thought that he was just a concerned father and that's all. They also tried to have America's Most Wanted to pick up the case for public help, but nothing came about it. Nels even went so far as to send a letter to Chief of Police Gates on why certain items were not inspected further and felt the case was not moving forward in a fast enough pace, but they didn't receive any response from Gates. The case went through a few detectives with Lyle Mayer as the first lead detective of the case. Stephen Fisk would then take over the case and interview the family in 1992. And during the interview, Nels mentioned that John's ex-girlfriend was a cop. And despite that evidence, Fisk ignored Nels' comments. They also refused to perform DNA analysis on the case, even if Nels flipped the bill himself. Also, the relationship between the Rasmussens and the Ruettens began to sour as Nels felt John knew something about his daughter's death, especially when John failed the lie detector test in 1986. Before John's father's death in 1996, Miss Ruetten tried to resolve his differences with Nels. However, Nels felt that they couldn't really bury the hatchet if Miss Ruetten doesn't face the fact that they need to know what his son knows. And a month after Sherri's death, John would then move out of the condo. He wouldn't go back to his workplace, and he would live with his parents for about 6 months in San Diego before he moved on and remarried and just kind of started a new life. So in terms of the author, Matthew McGough is an author, journalist, screenwriter who has published works in the Atlantic, the New York Times, and the Boston Globe. His father was a lawyer and his grandfather was a Brooklyn prosecutor. He attended Williams College and Fordham Law School and started working as a law clerk to a federal judge in New York. In 2004, his book Bat Boy, Coming of Age with the New York Yankees, was published, which details his experience working as a bat boy for the baseball team. This led to a short-lived TV show which prompted him to move to LA. He was then hired as a legal consultant for Law and Order before later being promoted as a writer from 2006 to 2010 during the last 4 seasons of its original run. While on a trip to Norway around 2008, they found out that 2 paintings of Edvard Munch, The Scream and Madonna, had been stolen from the Munch Museum shortly before they arrived, prompting McGough to have a book idea about art theft. He reached out to the art theft department at LAPD headquarters in downtown LA, led by Detective Lazarus and her partner, and conducted interviews about recent cases they worked on, how they looked into a case, what are their tactics, and how they solve cases. More than a year later, McGough was working on Law and Order at the writer's room, pitching ideas when one of his coworkers mentioned a detective from the art theft department being arrested for a cold case. A few days after Lazarus's arrest, McGough attended her arraignment and spent 3 years attending every court proceedings. After the trial, he obtained the complete court file, trial transcripts, and copies of the trial exhibits. About 4 years into his investigation, he began interviewing people. He began interviewing family members and anyone who knew Sherri or knew the case. He tried to interview John Ruetten and Lazarus, but they declined. In total, it took McGough about 9 years to write this book. So far, the Lazarus Files have been the most well-known book and case he's ever investigated. So in terms of Lazarus grew up in Simi Valley before being accepted to UCLA in 1978. She moved into the Dykstra Hall on campus, and that's where she met John Ruetten. At the time, Ruetten was a sophomore and Lazarus was a freshman. Per John's word, he mentioned that the two never had sex, nor did they ever had a serious relationship with other people during their college days. And he described their relationship as the gray area between dating and a close friendship, but definitely not boyfriend and girlfriend. Other men who attended UCLA at the time noted that they never considered Lazarus as a girlfriend, claiming that they were put off by her brash sense of humor. And she was also known as a prankster. When John was in the showers at the dorms, Lazarus took his clothes and ran off with it. She also took a photo of him in his undies while he was sleeping. She even kept the photo for herself with the caption, John Ruetten, 1979, Dykstra Hall. I snuck in room and took this picture. One day, she expressed her feelings for John with his roommate that year, David, but mentioned that John felt they should remain friends. And despite John wanting to keep the relationship platonic, they did went on trips to San Diego to meet his parents. And he also attended her graduation and hung out with her family. And it's almost like that kind of level of I'm introducing my future partner to my family level, rather than I'm just introducing a friend of mine to my family. Even people and family members were a bit confused by their relationship and felt the same way that I'm thinking. And I think you're thinking the same way as well. At this point, John is reminding me of Zach from The Bachelor, where he doesn't really like confrontation and tends to end relationships without trying to hurt one's feelings. And it's almost like we can still be friends. Can we, John? Can we? Despite wanting to be friends, John later admitted in a sworn testimony that he and Lazarus had sex 25 to 30 times between 1981 and 1984. In 1983, Lazarus shocked everyone by deciding to enroll with LAPD. At the time of her enrollment, LAPD was trying to increase their number of female officers to make it seem that they're not discriminate against women and did not have any favors of male officers over female officers. During her time at the academy, she was commented as being physically fit and vocal with a type A personality. And once she graduated from the academy, she was assigned on duty at the Hollywood station and worked there for a couple years before transferring to the Devonshire station on March 31st, 1985. Meanwhile, in May 1984, John would meet Sherri Rasmussen through his best friend's fiance at a party. By Christmas, they were officially a couple, and by May 1985, less than a year before they met, they were engaged with a November 23, 1985 date. When John proposed to Sherri, he and Sherri told friends and family. However, he didn't really tell Lazarus himself. Instead, she heard it through a friend, feeling that they were an actual couple, which I totally understand. She mentioned in her journal that she was very depressed when she heard about the engagement, which at the time, she was really into journaling, She even sent a letter to his mom expressing her feelings to him. And one night, Lazarus called John and was crying and asked him to come and stop by her apartment. It was later confirmed in a sworn testimony that they had sex that night. Sometime between June and July 1985, Lazarus arrived at Sherri's office at the Glendale Adventist Medical Center. She was reported to dress scantily clad in short shorts and a tight t-shirt. Despite Sherri's assistant, Sylvia, noting that Sherri was on lunch to Lazarus just decided to stay and wait. And when Sherri arrived, the two women went into her office. Both of them came out with Lazarus going first a few minutes later and Sherri coming in a minute after that. Sherri stepped out of her office looking very upset and showing signs of crying. She then tells Sylvia that she's leaving for the day. Sylvia was not interviewed by detectives, nor did she ever reach out to them about the incident during the investigation of Sherri's murder. Instead, she informed her secret to a friend called Vera, who swore that she would not tell a soul. However, as the years went by and the case was unsolved, Vera felt that she should tell someone and decided to provide Sylvia's name to LAPD in hopes that they would reach out to her. Sylvia died in 2000, just 3 years after Vera reached out to LAPD. LAPD did not reach out to Sylvia about the incident. Lazarus didn't write anything about the visit to Sherri's workplace, but Sherri informed her parents about the incident. Though it isn't official of what she said to her family, Sherri did note that Lazarus said, "If I can't have John, no one can." Very unique. Sherri also confronted John about Lazarus, stating that Lazarus admitted in that conversation both her and John had sex the night that he went over to her place to comfort her. And John accepted it and admitted that he did have sex with Lazarus, but noted that he made a mistake and asked for forgiveness from Sherri. And despite the hospital incident and John's infidelity, the two stayed together and got married on November 23rd, 1985. Lazarus didn't add any mention of the wedding in the journal. She did receive a card from John's mother on December 12th, which made her very, very sad, but it is unknown what the card enclosed. There was another incident at Sherri and John's condo when Lazarus showed up at their front door. She stopped by and asked John to wax her skis, and overstayed her welcome by probably hanging out for a little over 15 to 30 minutes. John was pretty lax about the favor, offering to complete the task. He didn't stand up for Sherri and confronted Lazarus about the sudden visit. Again, it's like very Zach behavior. As a result, Sherri had to step up and ask Lazarus to leave. Lazarus then came back a week later, but this time it was a shorter visit, but she was at the front door. Sherri mentioned to her father about the two incidences, which Nels was very surprised that Lazarus was able to get into the condo. He noted that people need a gate opener in order to go through the driveway, and that they need to be considered a resident by the management in order to receive a key to the pedestrian gate. Lazarus did not mention about the two visits in her diary. A month before Sherri's murder, Sherri decided to stay home and prepare for a lecture when she saw Lazarus standing in her living room in uniform. She was alone in the condo as John left earlier for his new job, and Sherri ordered Lazarus to get out, which she did. When she informed her father, Nels believed that Lazarus mistimed and felt that Sherri was the one that left early and was probably having a fling with John while Sherri was at work, allegedly. It was very surprising given the fact that Sherri did not hear Lazarus come into the condo, and Sherri ended up not reporting this to LAPD in fears that she might have been made fun of or felt that it wouldn't go in her way. On February 24th, Lazarus was listed on the daily worksheets as having a day off. And while Sherri's case was going cold, Lazarus did have a stint as a DARE ambassador and made public appearances throughout her time as the ambassador. She was then promoted to detective in 1994 and was assigned in the investigative analysis section and moved to the station in Van Nuys. While working at IAS, she focused on providing and maintaining a standard for LAPD. It is unknown if Lazarus allegedly knew that Sherri's case was in the Van Nuys station, nor if she allegedly altered any items on the case. She also appeared on the season finale of Family Feud. She also stopped journaling on August 10th, 1986, but kept her journals. And she also hung out with John a couple times between 1986 and 1992. They both even went to Hawaii for a scuba diving trip. However, their relationship fell off, and Lazarus got married to a cop who worked at the Van Nuys station in 1992, and they adopted a girl. So in terms of how she was caught, it started off with Lloyd Mahoney, a senior coroner's criminalist who collected the swab of the bite mark and sealed the swab in evidence envelope. The swab somehow disappeared between 1986 and 2004 from the freezer where the other evidence for Sherri's case were placed. In 2006, Jim Nuttall, detective for the Van Nuys department, was asked to move unsolved cases from their worn out blue binders to heavy-duty folders. He had two binders on his desk that he looked over. One of them was Sherri Rasmussen. He transferred the items to the new location and did not return to them until 2008, when the department had more time to review cold cases. By 2009, he took upon investigating the case. He discovered that in 2005, a DNA analysis was completed and found that the suspect was a female, which was conducted by criminalists at the SID Jennifer Francis. She originally noticed that the victim's blood type was type A, but the suspect's blood was type O, and she even tried to find the swab of the bite mark as the case did not have the swab on file. After several attempts of calling the lab assistant was able to find the swab, and it was kind of like tucked in the back in like a very old raggedy envelope. The test was conducted to find that it was a female DNA. Through the CODIS, it was determined that the suspect was not on the criminal database. However, when Jennifer Francis brought this up to the detective of Sherri's case at the time, Cliff Shepard, he ignored the theory and just kept believing that it was two robbers. When she detected that the DNA was female, Shepard just changed one of the genders to female for the robbers, and that was it. As he read through the case, Newtold discovered that Lazarus was John's ex and is a LAPD officer. Fearing that Lazarus would make a run for it if she heard about the investigation and her husband working at the Van Nuys station at the time, he kept the case under wraps. They were also nervous about LAPD officials stopping the case as the police department was under reform, with Chief Bill Breton helming at the wheel to make sure that the department's moral and reputation was improved. As a result, they would name her under an alias name called Number 5, and it was to represent the 5 women Sherri knew well enough if they rang the doorbell. Newtold interviewed family and friends of Sherri, and that's where Nels notified Newtold that Lazarus was a cop and John's ex-girlfriend. In the autopsy reports, it was mentioned by officials that Sherri had an injury above her upper right eyelid. However, the injury wasn't cross-checked until 2009. So they took a mold of the shape and compared it to a .38 Smith & Wesson Model 49 revolver. They also cross-checked the bullet holes found on the second floor landing to match a .38 Smith & Wesson. And funny enough, Lazarus did had a .38 Smith & Wesson, but it was reported stolen in Santa Monica on March 9th, 1984. Allegedly, she reported that someone stole her gym bag in her car, and it happened to carry the Smith & Wesson. And the location of Lazarus's gun remains a mystery. Given that they had enough speculation that Lazarus is Sherri's killer, Newtold knew that he needed hard evidence, and by hard evidence, he means DNA. In order to get DNA from Lazarus, Newtold and his partner, Bub, briefed Deputy Chief Michael Moore. Moore then deployed the internal surveillance unit to gather DNA sample from Lazarus. The ISU would then surveillance Lazarus and gather her usual schedule from waking up at 5 a.m. to get the newspaper to heading to LAPD station in downtown LA via the train. They tried to gather some wrappers here and there for DNA, but it wasn't enough to create a DNA profile. And then one night, while out with her daughter, she threw out a pizza and a cup of soda, and from that they were able to get DNA, and they were able to match the DNA to the DNA from the bite mark. Since the robbery homicide division was on the same floor as Lazarus's art theft department, the RHD Lieutenant Greg Strength assigned the case to Dan Jaramillo and Greg Stearns, as they did not know Lazarus that well compared to other officers. They also kept the case pretty tight and never sent any emails or any items of the case through the RHD units. Newtold wanted to inform Rasmussen's about Lazarus, but he was informed to stand down until she is arrested. The next day, on July 5th, 2009, Lazarus was invited to the basement interrogation room to answer some questions on a possible art theft case. This was because the interrogation room required officers to turn in their guns before entering. However, as the 3 officers talked, they soon turned towards John Ruetten and later Sherri and her death. Feeling that she needed a lawyer, Lazarus leaves only to be arrested right outside. Chief Bratton made a press conference about the case and about the arrest. He credited the RHD for solving the case, even though it was technically Newtold that brought it, but on June 9th, Lazarus was arraigned for first-degree murder. Nuttall wanted to offer the Rasmussens a ride to the courthouse, but was told by officials not to do that, quoting, "That's not how we do things." The next day, Shepard offered a belated congratulation to Frances on her DNA analysis. Nuttall and Bub received calls from Nightline to conduct interviews about the case. Nuttall emailed Charlie Beck to seek advice on if he should take the interview. And during the Nightline segment, Charlie Beck was the only LAPD official to be interviewed for the case and for the episode, who quoted Lazarus as having a good reputation, hardworking, and very energetic. The Rasmussen took legal action against LAPD, claiming that Lazarus took her position and power to kill their daughter and hide evidence to get away with murder for over 23 years. Internal Affairs began interviewing the investigation in regards to the claim. They interviewed Frances about the incident between her and Shepard when she brought up the DNA analyst. However, IA agents, Klon, considered Francis to be emotional and was looking for answers from him, and he also advised that she should seek therapy, claiming that she was paranoid. And even his supervisor Thompson believed that Frances was paranoid. She also felt that she was treated very differently after Lazarus's arrest. However, Internal Affairs deemed that there was not reasonable evidence that there was a cover-up from LAPD or from Lazarus. The Rasmussen then filed a lawsuit against LAPD, but the judge dismissed the case, arguing the grounds of governmental immunity. Since their lawsuit was dismissed prior to the commencement of discovery, the Rasmussen were not given the opportunity to despise any witnesses or subpoena any police documents. Francis filed a complaint against Klon and Thompson, which caused another investigation from IA to commence, but they closed the claim once they received word about the lawsuit being dismissed. They also argued that Klon and Thompson's actions did not rise on any level of misconduct. Francis filed a lawsuit on April 29th, and the jury sided with the city. On May 4, 2010, while on trial for Sherri's murder, Lazarus retired from LAPD. She was never fired, nor was put on administrative leave since her arrest. She receives full pension with an annual amount of $66,000 from 2017, which increases every year. And on March 8, 2012, Lazarus was found guilty of first-degree murder and was sentenced to 27 years to life in prison. The individual who left the file boxes on Jim Nuttall's desk in 2008 has not yet stepped forward, nor has been publicly identified. So in terms of the differences between the book and other podcasts and other stories about this, I would say the book delves more into the life of the people involved in this case. It focuses on Sherri's story as well as Lazarus's story. It does go a little bit into Johnruetten, but not as much compared to the first two. It also goes into details about how they grew up, where they came from, their education, their relationship, especially with Lazarus and Johnruetten. The author also brought up the relationship between the Rasmussens and the Ruttens. It kind of felt that Johnruetten's parents were almost aligned with the behaviors of parents of Chris Watts and Brian Laundrie, where they felt that their son didn't do anything wrong despite having a history of cheating on Sherri. Both families were fine until Rasmussen said something about how John didn't stand up for Sherri and also how he failed his lie detector test. This caused the two to argue, causing both families to not talk to each other after that. For Lazarus, they delve into the connections that she had, which I did not know that she had close connection not only to Chief of Police Gates, but she also had connections to Chief of Police Charlie Beck and Chief of Police Bill Breton. And fun fact, Bill Breton is Charlie Beck's godfather. And also fun fact, Charlie Beck and Lazarus worked with each other at the Hollywood station when they started working as cops, which explains the comments. And also, I was pretty shocked that Lazarus was pretty well known to the public and had been on so many interviews, TV spots. I was very surprised by that. So there was also another case that the author brings up, which is the murder of Catherine Bradley. Bradley's case was different compared to Sherri's case. She came from a lower class family. She lived in a one-room trailer behind her mom's trailer, and she was a cashier at a grocery store called Fetco, which is now a Target on Raymer Street. Despite being gentle and upbeat, she did have a drinking problem. Most of the time she would go to a nearby bar, which was like literally a block from where she worked, and it was called The Hunter. She was in a relationship with a man named Garth of 2 years, who was 10 years her senior. However, she found out that he was married, and despite him saying that he was going to break up with his wife and get divorced and move with Catherine to Arizona, but that didn't happen. After her relationship ended in June 1987, she wanted to drive to Fraser Park to see him at work. However, once she was there, he wasn't at the gas station that he works at, and she decided to drive around the area to see where she could find his parents' place. And that's when she got pulled over for DUI. Her car got towed and her mother had to bail her out. She ended up owing $672.50, with her having to pay $140 within 2 weeks. And adjusted for inflation, it's $1,785.39 with $371.68 due in the first 2 weeks. Kathy was involved with a few men, including Noel, who lived in an apartment not far from the Hunter and within steps from the location of where Kathy's body was found. Though they had a one-night stand, they remained friends. She also befriended another man named Joey, who was trying to get his life back in order after his marriage failed and his drug addiction worsened. The two were very close, but they were taking their time with the relationship. She also befriended a sergeant called Sergeant Waters, who would take her to a shooting range to practice shooting. On January 8th, 1988, a narcotics detective was shot and killed in the line of duty while serving a search warrant in South Central LA. The officer's funeral was held on January 14th in Granada Hills. 2 officers from the LAX narcotics crew, Deputy Macmillan and Deputy Turner, were in attendance. A group of detectives, including Macmillan, Turner, and Waters, went to the Hunter after the funeral for drinks. Friends and co-workers of Kathy noted that the bar that night was very, very tense and argued that deputies were throwing racial slurs left and right. Bonnie, a friend of Kathy, noted that Macmillan was hitting on her and tried to invite her to his cabin that weekend, but Bonnie refused. He even exposed himself in front of Bonnie, to which turned her off of him. When Kathy greeted Noel upon his arrival at the bar, Macmillan asked Bonnie if Kathy was an N-word lover. Bonnie went to the restroom, annoyed about what she just heard, and when she came back, she saw Noel arguing with Macmillan, Turner, and Waters. Macmillan went on a racist tirade and wanted to fight Noel. Bonnie and a couple other people tried to break up the fight. Noel noted in an interview that he left at 9 p.m. that night and went back to his apartment. He wasn't sure why Kathy was near his place at the time of her murder. Bonnie left the bar at around 11 p.m. She noted that Kathy and Macmillan were at the bar, very close to each other. The bartender, Maruska, noted that Kathy left the bar at 12 a.m. with Waters, Turner, and Macmillan. He wasn't sure of Macmillan's name, but he knew that he was shorter than Turner and had blonde hair. He did hear a commotion outside, and when he went out to check, he saw the 3 guys laughing as Kathy was on the ground in the puddle of water, also laughing. During his interview with LAPD, Macmillan noted that around 11:30, he left the bar with Kathy, Turner, and Waters. He mentioned that Kathy was drunk and kept flashing her boobs at him at the bar. He also mentioned that it was Turner who was getting in a heated conversation with Noel. And once Turner and Waters left, Kathy got into Macmillan's car. They drove around for a bit and parked at a nearby residential area, and the two had sex. He then mentioned that after they had sex, Kathy just all of a sudden got upset or got mad, and she said that she had to go, and she just left. He mentioned that he last saw Kathy about 1 a.m. that night, but he changed his mind in a later interview, noting that he got home in Lakewood at about 1:32 a.m. That wouldn't make sense because he would have had to leave early at 12 a.m. in order to make it home at about that time. Though Noel mentioned that he did not hear any suspicious activities outside of his apartment, a few of his neighbors did. A neighbor named Harold mentioned that he heard a domestic dispute happening outside in the alley at around 12 a.m. He closed the window to hear his girlfriend, but the fight ensued. He joked to his girlfriend, saying that someone is getting killed outside, but the fight continued, including the woman saying, "Stop it, you're hurting me." He did pop his head out to see what was going on, but he couldn't see anything, and he felt that it was a local pimp and one of his workers. A woman named Pear noted that she kept hearing a woman saying, "You're hurting me, Lewis," and a third person named Chris noted hearing a thud of sounds of apples being squashed multiple times at around 12 a.m. Kathy's body was found at 8 a.m. by a worker from the crisis management center next door. Her blouse was rolled up and her pants were rolled down to her ankles, exposing her privates. It appeared that she had been stabbed multiple times by a screwdriver, which was found next to her body. During the autopsy, they detected that she had a blood alcohol level of 0.28, which is 3 times the legal limit. Also, the first person to drive at the scene of the crime was Lloyd Mayer, who was the first lead detective of Sherri's case. People speculated that Noel was the culprit, given the fact that his apartment was right next door to her body, and a year before his death in 2012, he offered to provide DNA evidence to LAPD. His DNA did not match any evidence collected in the 1988 crime scene. There was a little publicity of the case and a one brief public mention from the police, but nothing went into fruition. Kathy's mother, Mary Postma, did file a lawsuit against LA County Sheriff's Department and asked for $10 million in damages in 1988, claiming that the department knew that one of their men committed the crime and tried to hide the evidence. This brought the investigation up, which gave Michael notice in 2011 while investigating Sherri's case. This was the second folder that Nuttall had on his desk, and when Nuttall tried to go back to see that case file, it was gone, and it's unknown why it was moved nor why it was on Nuttall's desk in the first place. However, in 1989, 2 of the deputies were dropped from the lawsuit and it remained unsolved, and the jury ended up deadlocked on the decision. Macmillan, the last deputy to be with Kathy, argued that she was still alive when he last saw her. However, Kathy's mother argued that he should be responsible for her death, even if he was the last person to see her and even if Kathy was alive when she left. As a result of the deadlock lawsuit, the case went cold again. Deputies that were involved in the case eventually continue on with their careers, with Macmillan moving to Big Bear before passing away in 2015. I'm pretty glad that McGough brought up Kathy Braley's case because it kind of reflects how not all cases are like Sherri Rasmussen's case. Not all of them have a happy ending. Some of them end up being unsolved. It also represents a case where there might have been some allegations of law enforcement tampering evidence or hiding evidence. And there could also be a reason due to the person's status, their class level, their race. It plays a part in how cases are reopened or how cases are solved. So far, Kathy's case still remains unsolved. McGough was intrigued by the case in 2011, 2 years into his investigation on Sherri's case. He mentioned that he handed all the paperwork and recordings he gathered on Kathy's case to LAPD in hopes that they would look further into it. However, there have been no updates since then, and right now the case is mostly just speculations and allegations, especially when the main suspect is dead. What really surprised me was the fact that a lot of people mentioned the incident with Lazarus Rasmussen and the detective, because podcaster kept saying that he kept bringing up that Lazarus is a cop and John's ex-girlfriend, and they would always say that the detectives would reply saying, "You are watching way too many crime shows." But there's nowhere in the book when I read it of any mentioning of it. So I'm not sure if this was later in an interview that was brought up or it was just updated. It's unknown. After the trial, while the book ended with Lazarus being sentenced to prison, there is more to the story. So she tried to appeal, but they were denied. She then went to her parole board hearing in November of 2023, to which the board thought that she was eligible for parole. However, as we are speaking, the parole board decided to put pause on the probation as they want to give Gavin Newsom's office time to appeal. If Gavin is smart, he'll prevent Lazarus from being on parole. I would prefer if Lazarus stays in prison, as she got away with murder for over 23 years. By receiving parole after only serving 11 years is almost a slap in the face to the families and to the victims of this case, almost encouraging people to commit crimes knowing that they would be released earlier than the time that they got away with it. As of today, there have been no statements or apologies from LAPD or any detectives involved with this case. Lazarus has yet to admit that she committed the crime and claims her innocence. She still receives her pension. In terms of my opinion, I feel that the book delves into the case very well. It provides a lot of details that most of the podcasts I listen to don't. It also brings another case of a mysterious murder of another woman whose case never got the justice it needed. It's interesting that Catherine's case kind of went into crosshairs with Sherri's case in 2008. The book also opens the issue with police when it comes to investigating their comrades. If a police person or deputy is involved in some sort of crime, there is a chance where they could get away with it. Maybe it's evidence getting lost or getting sent to different departments. Maybe it's police failing to go into detail into the investigation or questioning things while interviewing people, or they interrogate an innocent person until they admit that they committed the crime, only for that person to spend so many money and so many years trying to prove that they were interrogated incorrectly. So it is unknown whether there was evidence tampering from Lazarus or from her colleagues. This is all theories and assumptions. However, it's obvious that this does happen, as it takes decades, especially with a case like Sherri Rasmussen's, for the truth to come out. And it's also PSA for anyone who has fears of regrets or doesn't want to break ties with someone if they are no longer interested in them. Please stop. Just shut it down. Because if you don't, you're just going to act like Zach and just play with Gabby's emotions, saying it's a tough decision for me to make, despite saying that you know what you want. This causes people like Gabby to be upset because they felt that they were in love or in a relationship. And it also just like causes like other incidences like Lazarus. I would give this book a 10 out of 10. That is it for me. Thank you for watching this video with my monotone voice and now broken down voice. If you made it this far into the video, thank you for listening. As an achievement, here is a photo of a man who is brought to justice after spending decades of getting away with stuff due to privilege. If you like this video, hit the like and subscribe button.
Hello, Editing Jeanette here. I was going to say that we only have 13 subscribers, but I took a quick look at my channel and we actually have 15 subscribers. So we made our goal for this year, and I guess my new goal for the remaining of this year as well as next year is 20 subscribers. So yeah, let's just keep it going. Thanks.
Also, we hit 2,000 views on my channel with over 600 views on Project Greenlight video. Like, I really appreciate it, and let's keep it going. I'll see you guys. Bye.